Okay, so we're leveling out here, Derek. So I'm just going to kick us off and then I'll pass it along to you, okay?
Excellent.
So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Navigating COVID-19 webinar. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Chris Mann, Sponsorship Specialist for the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, and I'm your host today. This webinar is about embracing a certain framework and that will help your businesses grow and proactively move forward. Our speaker today is a business consultant who knows how to predict success, confidently make business decisions, and find new opportunities. We have several questions already submitted, and I'm happy to ask them on your behalf. If you have more questions, please feel free to add them into the chat box, or you can also raise your hand and we'll unmute you and you can ask that to Derek live. So now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker today, Derrick. Derrick is a senior business executive with over 35 years experience with a track record of successfully overachieving his revenue and profitability objectives. Drawing from his success, he launched his own firm, Four Blade Consulting, to deliver a framework for business that provides predictable outcomes focused on cash, people, strategy, and execution. From Four Blade Consulting, Derrick Westhaver. Thanks so much for joining us, Derrick, and I'll pass it along to you for your presentation.
Good morning, Chris and Halifax Chamber and everyone attending. Really appreciate being here today. This is these are exciting times. They're changing times, and very proud to be able to be here to kind of talk about what we do and some of the things that companies can take advantage of and benefit from. I'm going to start walking through our presentation. We're going to be on for about 30-35 minutes in the prezzo, and then we can switch into a Q&A and cover those questions, Chris. So we're in the middle of a pandemic. The pandemic continues, and the first question everyone has is, what do we do now? So if you look at some of the concerns we've heard from other companies that we work with, is it about revenue? Is it about sales? Is it strictly about paying your bills, keeping your company afloat? Is your main concern health and safety? Is it staffing and resources? Is it, not reopening or just staying open? So these are the things that we keep hearing. And I think these things are going to continue as we go through the next, 12, 18 months. These types of concerns will be top of mind every single day for everybody in business. So I want to kind of help you find some ways that you can actually alleviate some of the stress around these things as we go through the presentation. All right, so some of the things we're going to take away from today. So we have a proven framework that we've put together that we apply to companies through our processes to help them become more predictable and more confident around their revenue numbers and their business growth. Really, our strategy has all been around business growth. Since the pandemic, we kind of changed our dials a little bit to almost ensuring that companies that are operating today can actually survive as they move forward through these pandemic events and different changes. The second thing is increased clarity equals increased opportunity. So the clearer you are about where your business is headed, the more able you are to identify those new opportunities or maybe new verticals or new sections of business that you want to tackle that you haven't before. And third is one of my most popular ones. It's doing more of what doesn't work, doesn't make it better. So how do you kind of get out of those habits that you have that, and we all have them, that we continue to want to change and free us from kind of doing the same things over and over again? I think it was the statement is, if you continue to do the same things over and over again and expect different results, it's the definition of insanity. So we want to make sure that we move away from the insanity. So as an agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about our company, what we do, our team, the services, funding, and partnerships that we have. So a little bit of background, Four Blade Consulting kind of came from, the name came a little bit from my water ski background. So I was a tournament water skier, wakeboard, and barefooter. And for many, many years, I had a 3-blade prop on my boat. I moved to a 4-blade prop. I saw tremendous value. Performance was different. It changed everything that I did. And we kind of talked about that and likened that to business. And when we talked about the different tenets, which are people, strategy, execution, and cash. So we actually take that kind of premise of 4 different elements working together to have a very smooth motion forward for your business. And we found that if there's a problem with the people side, then that can ripple through the company. If there's a problem with the strategy side, execution, or cash, they all create ripples in the company that can slow you down from proceeding and hitting those goals that you want to hit. So that's kind of a little bit of the background. A little bit about our history. We're going to talk a little bit about our team and where we come from and what we've done. So a few highlights. It's kind of like why us. So for the last 35 years, I'm a local boy. So born and raised on the South Shore, Nova Scotia, moved to the city when I was 18 years old, went to school here, started my career here. And I've worked based out of Halifax my whole career. The first 12 years, I traveled all across North America working with different companies. And in the late 90s, I moved into working with some of the Fortune 500s like Compaq, Dell, Hitachi, and those companies. And we've done some really cool projects and we've achieved some really cool things. Here at Compaq, we point that one out. It was, driving 32 quarters, hitting the revenue targets 32 quarters out of 33. So that was an amazing run. Over at Dell, within 7 years, moving them from almost no business in the kind of the corporate enterprise space to driving over $200 million in sales across 7 years. That was another great milestone. And then Bulletproof, adding those divisions to Bulletproof and moving them from almost no sales up to 7.3 million in the span of 3 years. That also went from 2 employees to 9 employees. So we've been using parts of the framework that we talked about today for the last 20 years or more. And now we've refined that into a very formalized process that we can actually understand the different elements of your business, record those elements, and then put plans together for growth and change. So our team is small. We currently have 3 people on the team with almost 100 years. And if I really talk about when I started work when I was 13 years old at the local gas station, worked there. I call that my first career. I started working there at 13. I worked there till I was 19. And then I retired, my first job. We have about 100 years experience between myself, Donna, and Glenn. Glenn, for instance, he's actually a unique individual because he started with Bell Canada here in Halifax, and he's been with them, stayed with them for 30 years before he took his retirement exit. And now he works on our team. So he's got a different perspective. I've worked with different companies and traveled a lot. So we've kind of got those 2 yin and yang kind of viewpoints. One from working with very large companies like Sobeys or Emira or the province of Nova Scotia. And then on the other side, Donna, myself, it could be Canon or Hitachi or whatnot. So this is kind of the background that we have. So this is kind of our question that we always ask. If we can help you increase your cash flow, increase your profit, and work the same number of hours in your business, would you continue the conversation? And most people are going to say yes to that. I would absolutely say yes to that. And that's our target. That's really our core goal, is to help drive that outcome in all companies. So if we look at how we got to here, you have to look back at history a little bit. And we look at what we call the leadership in times of crisis. So we're in the time of crisis today with the novel coronavirus and what it's doing to our society, how it's impacting our business, how it impacts how we actually operate as a business. And everything you thought you knew about business has changed, and we're still learning about the impacts and the outcomes of that. So if I kind of draw back to the history and some of the great achievements that we've seen that I posted there about Compaq and Dell and some of the others, we achieved those goals while these things were happening. So if I look at SARS, I remember, I was at Compaq at that time, the Y2K, we call it the dot bomb. So if you remember around 2001, all the business hadn't quite figured out how to use the internet the way we use it today and to have that as part of their business and driving the business forward. We went through September 11, 2001, the financial crisis of 2008, now the coronavirus in 2019. So we've always used this basis framework to drive business forward. And regardless of the impacts of the world or a pandemic or a financial crisis, we figured out a way how to apply those pieces to make your business work. So this is a quick view of, if we look back on the Dow Jones, for example, and take a look at it and see what's happened. You can see there some of the numbers and some of the changes. I started my career, the numbers were very, very low. The Dow Jones was like, 1,500 points. Now we're back to 27,000. But the interesting point here that I want you to take away is, if you look at the bottom, you see 2004, 2014. If you look at this, the kind of the speed at which that line travels up, the growth is so much different than it was throughout the 80s and early 90s. We've always found a way to fight back regardless of the event we're going through and drive business. And I believe that this look back on history will be the same as we go forward. So it's pivoting your business and understanding how you need to change in order to take advantage of the upswings when we get back into them, which I believe we're in now. So a key driving factor, you're working on your business, or we're going to help you work on your business while you're working in it. So you're focused working in your business to make sure that you're driving your business day to day to day. Now, on the other hand, it's sometimes the weekend before you sit back and have a breather and say, okay, this is where I want to take my business. This is a viewpoint, and this is the way I want to take it forward. So this is a key element that we focus on. So take a minute now, stop and think about this. So these are questions that I'll always ask if I'm talking to a new client. So do you have a 36-month rolling forecast? That is super critical in my world. If you don't, we help you build one. If you do, then we embrace that and make sure that it's a very sound 36-month rolling forecast. The next one is, does everybody in the company know what the number one priority of the company is? And not only that, but does your entire team that works with you have a goal that actually drives towards that priority? This sounds kind of simple sometimes when you kind of hear it for the first time or you hear it discussed this way. But if all of the goals aren't driven towards that priority, then that priority becomes the owner and the responsibility of one person. And that's what we drive to change, is to make sure the entire company is pointing towards that one priority. So regardless of what you do every day, something you do throughout that day drives towards the number one priority. And that's how you end up hitting those goals. Number three, your communications rhythm. Do you have one? What is it? We use something called the daily huddle. So every single day we have 5 minutes. It doesn't matter what part of the world I'm in. We have a 5-minute coffee in the morning. So last year I ended up in Sweden for a few weeks, and it was it was more a midday huddle just because of the time zones. But every single day we had a quick 5-minute, what's happening today, where are we headed, what's going on in the business, what do you think is going to happen, are there any obstacles, and then you get to it. So those are very important. We also do the weeklies, we do the monthlies, we do the quarterlies, we do the semi-annuals and the annuals. So we have a full structure throughout the year to make sure that we communicate and everybody knows what's happening in the company. So number 4, does everyone in the company have accountability for their work? So I learned this through, I heard this recently. It was 3 questions, and I love this term. So when you talk about accountability, the easy way to get accountability in your team is to ask 3 questions. First question is it good for the actual client that you're talking to? So is this outcome going to be good for them? Is the outcome going to be good for the company you represent? And the third one, will you be accountable for the outcome? So the quick 3 questions. Is it good for the client? Is it good for your company? And will you be accountable for the outcome? If everybody in your company asks those 3 questions, then 99% of the decisions that are made will be amazing results. There'll be the odd ones that aren't so great. However, you'll minimize it and shrink it. And then you'll have your whole team working together. And then the last one, do you have a way to celebrate and actually reward that outstanding performance? That's an area that's super important. And this is not necessarily a monetary thing. These are things that you do to identify and recognize that outstanding work. All right, let's talk a little bit about our services and what we actually do. And we'll walk through our business growth consulting, web training, executive coaching, and then we also have some ad hoc things we do as well. So, I love Charles Darwin. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's not the strongest, of the species. It's not the biggest. It's those that adapt to change. And I think everybody's feeling that right now, especially with the pandemic and how it's changed the way we operate from day to day. It's that adaptability to change is probably the biggest driver. And I always call out BlackBerry and Apple as two companies that kind of look the same, but they had a completely different strategy around adaptability. BlackBerry had a very unique offering. They started out and kind of invented a way to actually communicate back and forth with other people from a handheld device. And they stayed focused to that, to that unique differentiator, which eventually was their downfall. If you look at the Apple on the other side, Apple started out as a computer manufacturer to compete against the IBMs. And as they moved forward, their mantra was more around making information and access to information and technology, offering that as a way to increase a person's lifestyle, for lack of better terms. So they approached their business from an ecosystem play. So they started off as a technology company, then they moved into entertainment, they moved into music, they moved into communications, adding a telephone. So if you look at the Apple platform, it was an ecosystem. It wasn't just a device. So this is what I talk about adaptability. Apple had the ability to adapt and change, even when their founder and CEO passed away and the baton was passed to another individual in the company continued to thrive because they had that fundamental viewpoint of adaptability. So, our growth business consulting. So, what do we do? I'm going to walk through a kind of a quick overview of some of the things that we do and some of the things we target, right? So, if we can double your cash flow and triple your profit, sounds like a super lofty goal. I can tell you, I've got 2 clients right now. We're right in the middle of achieving those goals for them. So the process we follow, first off, we start off with we talked earlier about the 4 different tenets. We've got strategy, execution, people, cash. So we talk about strategy right here, and that's where we start. So we walk through core values for you and your company, the core purpose. If I asked you the question, why does your company exist? I expect to have a very quick answer. Say, we exist. So why does Forblade exist? We exist because we want to take the knowledge that we've garnered over the last 35 years and share that knowledge with other companies to help them grow and hit the goals that they want to achieve. So you should have the same for your company as well. And then we go through the 1-year goals, we go through the 3-year goals and targets, your core competencies, your profit per X, your BHAG. BHAG stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. I think it was Jim Collins that coined that phrase. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then your brand promise and your critical numbers. Critical numbers they're just that. They're your critical numbers. Ensure that you understand exactly where your company is. So we'll walk through this process. And then the second part is the 1-page plan execution. So now that we understand the strategy around where your company's going, now we start to lay out the execution plan to achieve that strategy. Here, you said you wanted to double the size of your company, and that was the number 1 priority of the company starting in January 1, and that was wrapped in the strategic 1-page plan. Then over on the execution side, this is where we start to design what needs to happen in order to achieve that. And we look at quarter by quarter. We look at the different themes per quarter. We understand what inhibitors are there, so we call those rocks. What are the things that you need to move? We talk about the accountability that each individual has and how they're actually those accountabilities will actually drive towards that number 1 priority. Seems kind of standard and straightforward. And a lot of these things you probably have knowledge around within your company. I call it the easiest hard work you'll ever do, because typically depending on the size of the team, this will take either a day or 2 days to actually go through these two processes. Once they're done, then we have what I call the cornerstone and the bedrock to start the company moving in the direction that you want in a predictable and measurable way. Critical numbers fall out of this. So they get generated as we go through this. And critical numbers are not just revenue and profit. These could be transaction numbers. These could be number of days without incidents. These could be number of days of operation. It could be the number of clients that you see. So the critical numbers will be designed to help drive back to that number one priority. And each person that's a key driver in the company will have critical numbers assigned to them that they will actually monitor, manage, and report on. So if I look back in history at a lot of the experiences that I've had, most of the critical numbers were strictly revenue and sales. Did you meet the sales targets? And did you meet the revenue targets? And that was pretty much all the insight that we had into the company. But we didn't really understand what that meant on the back end. I've actually had transactions and deals that I've worked on that were $1 million deals, but ended up being unprofitable at the end because the overhead cost outweighed the amount of profit we had on that product. So we look at those things and we dive in deep on that. So the new thing that's changed, or I guess it hasn't changed, the new thing that's happened is focus on virtual selling. And I think these are things that, and I'm taking this from companies that I've talked to, companies that I currently work with. Most of them, if I say, what's your virtual selling strategy? A lot of them will have a LinkedIn profile or they'll have a Facebook profile. But some of them might have a Twitter account, but it's not an outbound Twitter account. It's a inbound Twitter account. Very rarely has anyone said they have a YouTube channel. Most have a website. Some know about ClickFunnels or use ClickFunnels. And then there's Instagram as well. We have changed. If I look at these different platforms, LinkedIn versus Facebook versus, the ClickFunnels and so forth, I always thought, I always had the viewpoint, LinkedIn's for business, Facebook is for kind of home. Twitter's kind of all over the place. It could be, it could be news, it could be weather, it could be street traffic and that type of thing, and so forth as you go down through. And then on the bottom, I kind of call it Hootsuite and Zoho and Sprout. Those are tools that will actually encompass all of those different platforms and allow you to have a view to your customer from Hootsuite, for example, across LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and all these platforms. This is one of those places, if I go back to the adaptability and the change and the Darwin quote, this is a place where everybody needs to focus right now. If I take a look at some of the changes that have occurred, the way we sell to a client has changed. And the way the clients buy has changed. That has changed from a kind of feature function fit type sell and buy to strictly a value and purchase. So customers are now, they're kind of in the driver's seat, if you will, and they're actually buying the best value products they can find for their businesses or for themselves. So that's a real shift in what's happened. And this is something that needs to be embraced in a company, any company. It's really, it doesn't matter what kind of business you have or how you approach the market. You will have to have, in order to stay current and compete, you'll have to have all of these platforms addressed in your virtual selling strategies. So another process we go through is called core customer. So who is your core customer? And I'll ask this question a lot and say, so who's your core customer? And say, well, everybody can buy my product. Well, I'm sure everybody can buy your product, but who's actually your core customer? Who's going to get the deepest, richest value from your product? And that's a process that we go through that's very, very important. Now, the reason it's important is that when you can figure out your core customer and you can actually design your marketing and all of the different online presences to focus directly on that one customer and that customer persona, the chances of you garnering that business is way higher than if you have the approach that, the pray and spray, if you will, that you address the entire market and hope that you actually, become in contact with a potential buyer for your products. So this is very, very key. The second thing this does when you know a core customer, someone that's on your sales team or someone that's in the sales position actually looking for those customers, they know exactly how to identify that customer very quickly. So you save a lot of time trying to vet out who your customer is. And I've gone down this road. I've sold to people for months and then realized at the end of it, they're not my core customer. I am not going to be able to provide value to them, and they will not be delighted even if we have a transaction. So I should focus on the ones that want to partner with me and are my core customer. So that's very important. So the other piece is, the very last one, make it easy for sales. Allow them to go out, make those sales quickly, and then move on to the next one. And that helps drive that economic engine in your business. The next piece is X factor. People call it X factor, people call it secret sauce, a unique differentiator. So we actually will go through this process and uncover what the unique differentiator is in a company. And if you think back to my discussion about BlackBerry and Apple, if someone had to describe Apple, I'm sure they would describe their favorite app on the Apple device. So it might be your music app. It might be your directions map. It might be Waze. It could be your email app. It could be your stock market tracking app. So this is the ecosystem. So in Apple's case, their X factor is really the ability to have that ecosystem, expand that ecosystem. What that ecosystem does for them is actually creates a very sticky platform. So once you're on Apple, you don't want to leave it. You just want to grow and add more to it. So this process and this X factor exists in every company. And it's for us to go drive that. Once you've got that X factor and that unique differentiator, what that does is it gives you permission to charge as much or more than all of your competitors. So if you know exactly why you're different and the added value that you're going to offer to your clients, this is the place you're going to find it. We also walk through the business flow map. This is really a very financial type of discussion. So we want to understand all the inflows, and we want to understand all of the outflows that we have going through the company. And unless we understand all of those things, then the balance sheet and the cash flow statements are a bit of a mystery. So when we make sure that we go through those and understand those in depth so that we can actually use those to our benefit. We go through something called a functional accountability chart. And this is something that's dynamic. It changes for everybody. It depends on what you have for assets. So let's say for 4Blade, we have the head of company, which is myself. We have somebody that's responsible for marketing and our online presence. We have somebody that's responsible for sales. When it comes to the accounting, then we actually have a third party. So we use a third party for our accounting side, but we have a relationship with them. We have it documented here so that anybody in the company that's part of the leadership team can actually address and talk to anybody in accounting about any element. This could be legal. This could be any of those other functions that you want. And it's good to go through this on a yearly basis to make sure that you're happy with your accountant, you're happy with your lawyer, you're happy with your bookkeeper, you're happy with your banker, and those types of things. You're actually getting the benefit from them, because sometimes those are the pieces that are important, especially during times of a pandemic, when maybe you need a shoulder to kind of lean on a little bit financially. You need to know that you've got a good team that you're working with. We also walk through Rockefeller Habits. This is a totally fun one for me, very, very powerful. J.D. Rockefeller was the first billionaire in North America. So if you haven't read about him, go online and read a little bit. So he created a company called Standard Oil. Eventually, Standard Oil ended up, they were forcing him to break that up. It became Chevron and Exxon, Mobil, and a lot of those ones that we know today. But Rockefeller Habits, those are things that we use today and every day. So if you think about my discussion on having my coffee every day, that's around the alignment in the company. So I need to know that everybody knows what's happening and where we're headed, so that we don't get to the end of the week and realize that something should have happened on Tuesday that didn't. It helps us avoid some of those things. But really the whole premise behind Rockefeller Habits is to make sure that you and your team are completely aligned with the priorities and the goals of the company, and where you're headed. And once you start working with these, you'll always use them. It doesn't, I use them at home. So then we get all this information and you're going, okay, so we get all this information, what do we do with it? Well, I don't want to be a binder on your shelf. I don't want to be that dust collector 6 months down the road. You say, yeah, I remember doing this really cool thing, but now it's a dust collector on my shelf. So we actually have a software product and partner. The company's called Align. And we actually take all of this information and we put it in a cloud-based SaaS software platform so that you can actually use it and have it in the palm of your hand. So the Align software, it allows you to see all of the information around your company, all the things we talked about. Your one-page strategic plan gets in there, your critical numbers are there, your X factor gets in there. All the things we talked to so far get submitted in this platform so you can see it. It's not a CRM. It's not a project management tool. This is called a business alignment tool. So it's important that we understand that it's not the same as and I've worked with most of the CRMs, the HubSpot and Nimble and Salesforce and all of those. And then project management, you've got Monday.com and a bunch of different ones. Those are specifically designed for their features and functions. Align is designed from the company down. So the company owner, the CEO down. So he or she gets a full view of what's happening within the company. So we have our huddles, one-page plan, critical numbers, priority tracking, and then one of my favorites is Stucks. So these are some of the most powerful attributes of this tool. So as you're moving forward and you're expecting certain things to happen throughout the month in your business and something isn't happening, then the person responsible for it can actually submit a stuck and let everybody know on the team that they're stuck without having to pull together a formal meeting or write a bunch of emails, spend a lot of time. They can actually identify these things very quickly. And this is really one of the big features, is to get you moving faster, get that information flow in your company faster, and change the things that need to be changed. So this is just a sample dashboard that I built. And for critical numbers, you can design the critical numbers that are best for you. Revenue is always going to be in there. We could actually even add profit in there if you wanted it to. In this one, we have new leads, we have daily referrals, we have customers converted, and then revenue and things like that. We'll look quickly at kind of the daily huddles. In the tool, you can actually identify what the daily huddle is going to be about, and it also has the tasks there that each person is actually going to drive. So from your company's view, you get to see what everyone's doing, even when you don't see them from day to day. And right now with the pandemic, the way it is, most people are virtual, and this really helps drive your company forward with a virtual platform that you can use. And there's some people using it now that have seen some great successes. And if I connected you with them, they'd sell you the product probably firsthand. But there are lots of different use cases that we have out there that you can reference. All right, so we talked about Rockefeller Habits a little bit. Right here, if you look at the Align kind of feedback that they've seen in some of the numbers, they said that 48% of the priorities, if your team is actually using the platform, that the team that huddles with Align can take on 40% more priorities and complete 60% more of those in the same period of time. So you can see how it'll drive performance in your team by virtue of using the platform and toolkit. If you're a team leader, there's great advantages here for you as well. So it's not just from the CEO, it's from the division heads and senior managers as well. And then as we move through the organization, everybody starts to use the same format, and everybody starts to report their information back in a similar way so that we can capture that information and bring it into the tool set. And this is available, it's web-based and it's cloud-based. So, and there is an app as well. So you can have it on your cell phone, your Android or Apple. You can have it on your desktop, notebook, tablet, whatever you like to use. So every single day, for me, I have it on my handheld device. So at the end of the day, I can pull up a line. The first thing I see is my critical numbers. So I know exactly what's happening. And I'll also know what has happened and what hasn't happened based on those critical numbers. So it's a very, very powerful tool. So some of the other offerings we have, we're moving into, like everybody else, we're moving into web-based training. So we've added that in our roadmap as well. So we've got the business consulting, executive consulting, and what we do in those platforms is we have the 2-day workshop to onboard, 1 day or 2 day, depending what it is. And then we work all the way through the year. So the weekly performance reviews, the monthlies, quarterly business reviews, semi-annuals, 2-day retreats, which are on hold right now. And also the peer retreats are on hold right now as well until we kind of get back to post-pandemic, if you will. And of course, the SaaS software. The other piece we add to the pie is we have a bunch of different relationships. So we have senior accountants as our partners. We have venture capitalists as our partners. We've got HR and talent specialists. We've got senior manager specialists. We've got sales execution specialists, marketing specialists, and finance. So whether you're growing a company, whether you're a startup, whether you're moving and need to actually add more people, we have partnerships with other companies that specialize in these different roles. So we don't do these roles. We specialize, we let them specialize in it, and we have our relationships with them. So what's on the roadmap for the fall is we're actually going to move part of this content and make it a 12 series webinar. So we're kind of actually looking for feedback here too. So we're looking to actually have a fee-based online video-based training to walk through some of the things that I talked about. We're going to have 12 different sections. We have many more, but we're going to do the 12 fundamental sections as a web-based training. So you can see the info at forbladeconsulting.com. You can throw an email in there and let us know whether that's an interest to you and whether you think it would be something you would use. We have the one-on-one coaching, and that's really individual to individual. So a lot of the cadence that we have is the same as business to business, but this is very focused on an individual's goals. And then on the funding side, I encourage everybody to look at the government websites and dig around and look for funding. We're on the list at Nova Scotia Business Inc., for example. Nova Scotia Business Inc. earlier this year said they would offer up to $15,000 in forgiveness if you were hiring a company like Forblade Consulting to help you grow your company. So there's lots of details there. And I know that there's lots of other incentives that are coming up, and the Chamber does a fantastic job at sending those out. But dig around, check these things out, and you can find some support through the different funding organizations within the government. And then we have our partnerships as well that I touched on earlier as well. So we have a line, we have another company we built called Cairo MBA. We have the resourcing, accounting, and the financial assistance. If you need a referral, whether it be funding from the bank, whether it be funding from an investor, we can help in those areas as well. So from today, I know it's a lot to take in. I touched on a number of different things that Forblade does and how we help companies go from their current status and help them become more predictable and confident about their financials, their quarterly numbers, their yearly numbers, and where they're headed. We also help them understand, how to focus in on your core customer, focus on what you offer, focus on the value that you bring to the table to ensure that you're driving the most business that you possibly can. And then we start to stop doing some of the things that haven't been working. So, doing the same thing over and over again usually doesn't make it better. But if we can understand those things and break the barriers as to why they didn't work and what the actual outcome is, then we can help you get there. So with that, I'm Derrick Westhaver, Forblade Consulting. Thank you very much for listening this morning. And Chris, I know you've got some questions, and I'm super eager to hear them.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Thanks so much, Derrick. A lot of great information there. Really appreciate it. So I see that we have a number of participants. So I do encourage you, if you have a question for Derrick directly, you can put that in the bottom Q&A box below, and we'll get that read to Derrick. But also, if you'd like to ask a question live, just raise your hand, and my teammate Sandra will help facilitate that. So Derrick, our team put together a couple of questions, and we had a couple of questions beforehand, but I do have a couple of questions of my own. So my team may get a little bit mad that I'm not reading theirs first, but I'll ask these first because they like a lot of great stuff in here. But the one thing, like, I'll start off at the one priority that you mentioned and how your business should align on that one priority as a focus, and then everyone should be on the same page. How do you get it that everybody agrees upon that? Because I think, for a lot of our members, it's small businesses, so it would be quite easy for them to do because, usually you have an owner and a partner and maybe some senior management, but not very many frontline staff members. But how do you get everyone to buy into that one priority if there's so many different priorities that everyone thinks is a priority?
That, lucky for me, that's a question I get all the time. So
okay, perfect. Yeah.
It is, and it's always comforting for me when I get asked a question that is in line with some of the things that we've been doing. The real key is typically at the very head of the company, at the top of the company, whether that's identified as a CEO or a business owner or what have you, they usually have in their minds exactly where they want to take their company. And part of the process we walk through is we talk about, we start to do a bit of a discovery discussion. And that discovery discussion talks about where you want to be this year, where you want to be in 3 years, and where you want to be in 20 years. So those are the first 3 questions I will ask, and then we'll dialogue back and forth about those things. So once we get that settled, then we identify what the key priority is, what the very first number one priority is to achieve the shortest distance of a goal. So in the first year or first 3 years, if the priority is, I had a conversation a couple weeks ago and they said, we want to double our company size in 3 years. I said, okay, so now we know what the priority is. So we've landed on it. Now that we've landed on it, then what I usually do is get that leader, that company leader, to call a staff meeting. And then through that staff meeting, spend an hour with your team and actually walk through a process. We use a whiteboard and sticky notes. And we actually have some fun with this. We get everybody with sticky notes and we start asking those same questions. So if you were the leader of the company, and don't be shy, if you're the leader of the company, what do you think the number one priority of the company should be? And we get them to write that down. We get them to put it on the sticky note board, whether it's a whiteboard or what have you, and get them to explain why they think that is. So what that does, that whole process, is it embraces the entire team and your entire company, and they start to think and feel as though it's one united company. It's not a leader and then delivery people. So we bring that together. And typically you find as a leader, your team have come up with some really good ideas because they're sometimes closest to the customer. So they've known things, but weren't sure how to get them into the company. So that's the process we follow. And then at the end of it, the leader is the last one to go up. So we want to get the viewpoint from the team first. And then we want the leader to go up. And oftentimes it's kind of scary up front because the leader is saying, I have no idea what my team are going to say. I'm a little concerned.
Yeah.
But they usually, and the last 2 I've done, the team have said exactly what the leader was going to say. It came out through the team members. And then they walk through that priority and say, this is what's on my mind. And I need your help as my team to guide us to get there. And then we put that plan together and people start to understand what their goals should be to achieve that priority. Who owns the priority, right? Who owns the goal? And that's the process we walk through. Once we've done that once or twice with a couple of different elements, and we'll do it the same with core customer, for example. We do the same kind of process to get that information on the board. Then people become very embraced in that goal and that priority because they're part of the creation of it. They're not being told to do something. So it's a really cool product. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like a great exercise because when you think about it, especially from a leader standpoint, I mean, they might have created something and not reviewed it for quite some time. and everyone had come in at, the ground floor kind of thing and working towards something, and then that could have changed and the leader has no idea. And what a cool exercise. That's great. So how often do you think a priority should change? Like, I mean, with COVID, it probably like priority change right away, right? Like we gotta do something different. We gotta be agile. But how often would you suggest it should change?
So when you look at the priorities, we'll categorize them in two ways. So there's corporate priorities, and those are the longer term ones. So that's your three-year window, and we want to achieve that priority across that 3-year span. And then there are individual priorities, and then below that there are goals and tasks. So that's kind of the hierarchy that we follow. So there is one major priority for the company, but then when you get down to, you could be head of sales, or you could be responsible for delivery, or you could be customer experience. You're going to have your priorities as well for the quarter. So we'll break that down to a quarterly priority. Company, 3 years, individual, shorter time spans. And then we look at them every single quarter. We actually kind of look at it every day. If you're fully on board with the software package and you're watching your numbers and all that stuff, then your priority's there every day. And you get an email reminder once a week. Here's your priority, here are your tasks, here's your progress, here's where you are. So a status report by person. So, and coming back to the change piece, sometimes, some of the companies I've worked with, their priorities haven't changed, even though we've entered into a state of pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
That growth or that outcome they're looking for hasn't changed. Now it's how do we work within the environment we have to continue to pivot in some ways, or reduce some ways, or enhance some ways to still achieve that priority. So I don't have anybody that's come to me, Chris, and has said that because we entered into the pandemic, my priority has really changed.
Okay, interesting. Definitely. Because for us in the chamber, our priority has always been what can we do for our members, I would say. And we have a strategic plan that we're constantly working towards, but we needed to be agile in the way that we supported our members to get virtual immediately, rather than doing the in-person events, go virtually, and much to what you guys are doing with, the webinars and the virtual offering. So that kind of segues into my next question. And again, I encourage anyone, if you have a question, please interrupt me. You mentioned all the social media channels and the virtual selling, which I think is quite cool. Say if you're a business and you're starting, you're so busy, it's so hard to keep track of all the social media that you should be on and what you should be doing. And I know it's like very time consuming if you're not constantly updating or what have you. But say if you're a business that you don't have any social presence whatsoever, so you're not on any social media, where do you start? Is there an industry specific social media channel that you should get on that you would highly recommend?
So the answer I would first give is a LinkedIn profile.
Okay.
And you can, on LinkedIn, because there is no cost to create a LinkedIn profile, the first thing that I would suggest is to create that LinkedIn profile. The second piece of that is you can actually create a company page for your company under your profile.
Cool.
So we have my profile that we use for the business, and then we also have the 4Blade business page there as well. The third thing is, a website. Those would be the top 3 things that I would try to accomplish. The first one, LinkedIn, no fee. You create it yourself. It's all about you, so you already have all the information. The second thing is all about your business, so you already have all that information, and you can add that. Building a website, for us, we use GoDaddy. I know it's super affordable, and I'm thinking a couple $100 either a year, or I don't think it's a month. I think it's a year for a subscription. If you have someone that you can use to create a web page for you, it can be very inexpensive. But those are a couple of different things, because you want to be able to point someone to a little bit of information about your business. right? And that's really what it is. So you shake hands with someone and say, I'm in this vertical. This is what I do. This is, and you need to have that 15-second description of your company. Then you want to point them somewhere so they can get a little more information. We call that just kind of cold traffic or warm traffic. We want that to go somewhere so they can find you.
Great advice. That's really good. And I didn't know about the subcategory that you could have your business under your profile. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you can. And we use that now. And we actually can campaign out to, you can get a little fancier. And when I talk about core customer, you know exactly who you're looking for. You can actually campaign directly to those individuals through LinkedIn and through something called the Sales Navigator. And the Sales Navigator is a fee base, but it's I think it's $800-ish a year for the subscription. So $75 a month, and then I get access to a bunch of core customers that I can target. That's pretty inexpensive. One customer will usually pay for it.
Great. So another question I have is based on your the business flow chart, which I thought was good. And we joked earlier before everything went live that, I have a love-hate relationship with money. I love it when I have it and I hate it when I don't. But how often should you review that business flow chart with money? Is it like a weekly thing, daily thing?
No, it's really, this is a process you go through up front. And what we try to identify is all of the inflows of revenue and where they came from. And then on the other side, it's the outflows of expense and where they go. And we try to make that full circle to say, like, for example, for marketing, if you're spending, $10,000 a year in marketing, then on the other side, we have to figure out and find that $10,000 coming back in. Now, you might want 2-to-1 or 4-to-1 or 10-to-1 return. So we have to find that on the other side. That's part of that process. And what it does is it actually drives change in your company so that if you're actually having spend in a marketing division, for example, you can't track the inflow, then we have to build a tracking mechanism to identify the inflow. And then we have to make sure that we're getting a return on investment. That happens kind of almost in a bit of a bulk up front. And then we go through that annually. So at our annual review, that's one of the things that we go through again and say, okay, is this the same? Is that the same? Because I have one client that's just doubling his staff right now because he's going through that growth. We're hitting that double the size for his company. But now his expenses are going up. He's got 4 more staff. He's got more POS machines. So a lot of things that we did 6 months ago are now going to change 6 months from now that we have to make sure are on track. And that gives you a better understanding of where your money comes in and goes out. It gets you away from saying, I have all these checks, I must have money.
That's right. No, that's good. That's a good process to follow for sure. So one question, and I mean, you're talking about, if it's not working, you got to change, you got to adapt. How do you know, like, you use the example of Apple, right? And how adaptable Apple was in the ecosystem that they created there. But they've always changed and adapted and introduced a new, software or technology.
Right.
But if things are going well, how do you realize that you're like, if I don't kind of adapt and change, that eventually it's going to fall?
Yeah.
Like,
I actually had that exact conversation yesterday. I said, things are going great. What can we improve?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Nobody's interested. We're extremely relevant. I did some work with cybersecurity companies, and they're so relevant that, their appetite for change is very, very small, right? But if we roll this all the way back and we look at the strategy, that's the place where you must focus. You must ensure that your strategy is sound. And that is something that you go through once a year and revisit. So even when things are going tremendous, everybody knows that, the river can dry up. And there can be a drought. So things will change and shift. So if you continue to review your strategy on an annual basis and ensure that you're going forward in the way that you want, then you'll always be prepared for those things when you start to sense that change, right? And really the critical numbers start to drive that. And when I use critical numbers, I like people to look at it every single day. And I'll ask the question, do you look at your bank account every day? Well, maybe not. Okay, well, do you know exactly what's in your bank account every day? Well, pretty much. Okay, that's where we need to be in business. So if a month goes by or a quarter goes by and we haven't really had a good deep dive in that area, you can be surprised at the end of a quarter that you're not where your business isn't where you want it to be. So the strategy piece is the key to actually driving good, consistent, confident quarter after quarter business. And you'll actually feel the shift in business as it happens. Let's take, for example, a roofer, just as a quick analogy. You know, the guy's he's the most amazing asphalt shingle person in the world, right? And then someone introduces the aluminum roofing system, which may be a little bit cheaper. It lasts longer. Well, you know, that person, you know, in their strategy must be able to adapt to the different types of platforms that the roof can have, you know, as part of their strategy. Learning might be part of that strategy. So it all comes back to making sure that strategy is sound, and that we go through every single year. So every 12 months, in part of the 2-day review, that's the thing that we spend a lot of time on, is making sure that you're still relevant and that you can still grow and really hit those numbers. And
Great.
I've been there in both cases, the shrinking market and the growing market. So I tell you, the growing market's way more fun.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. No, that's great advice. Great feedback on that. So I just got a message here from my teammate, Sandra. We have time for one more question.
Okay.
So I'll focus that on centered around failing, I guess. And what I mean by failing is if you're just not seeing any kind of growth in your business, what do you recommend? Do you think it's just tear down, start all the way over, or what's your biggest piece if you're just not seeing the growth that you want to be achieving?
Yeah, so when it comes to the growth factors, those are the pieces that are the most critical, right? History is always such, and I always used to dislike this phrase, but history is such a good predictor of the future, right? So if you're not seeing the growth that you want to have, and you know, it comes back to doing the same things over and over again and not quite getting the outcome that you want, that's the time. And I know I'm tooting my own horn right now, and I'm guilty of doing it.
Yeah.
But seek a third party. And it could be us. It could be some other company that you know. It could be a peer company. It could be your number one competitor. And I've been in those situations where I've sat down with my number one competitor and I'm going, you're winning, I'm not. Dude, what are you doing? but my message is third-party consultation, right? You know, the first is, you know, an independent company like Fourblade, we can step in and start to dialogue about your business and where it's going. And we may have had experiences in the same vertical, but sometimes that quick conversation or quick consultation will give you the pointers as to what you need to change now and then move forward. It might not be big changes, and I never recommend big teardown changes. Like, because typically it's one little tiny thing or two little tiny things. You need to turn the dials a little bit, and the floodgates open. And
Okay.
So yeah,
Great.
don't be frustrated. Just ask for help, I guess is my message.
Right. Great advice, Derrick. Appreciate that. So sadly, we're out of time. I mean, it's hard to believe that an hour has gone by just like that. So thank you for joining us, Derrick, and thanks for everybody that joined us today for the webinar. And again, thank you, Derrick, to Fourblade Consulting. Very good stuff here. We hope that you're going to be able to join us, and I'm speaking to you participants, for our continuing webinar series. We're now booking into September, so stay tuned on that for a full lineup. We're also getting back to in-person events, so including our golf day at Glen Arbor that we just announced coming up on October 7th. So if you're looking to get involved with the Halifax Chamber, there's sponsorship opportunities as a special way for our members to support us when we're planning events, campaigns, and webinars like this one. If you're interested in those sponsorship opportunities, you can always email me. So it's chris@halifaxchamber.com, and all our information is on our website. And I should have mentioned that this webinar will be recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel. So a lot of great information. So if you wanted to follow up, you can rewatch that on YouTube. We'll also be following up with an email to all participants. So Derrick, if you have any information that you'd like us to share with participants, we can happily do that. So other than that, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.